So Bond is about to be killed, but uses his gadget ring and makes an escape. Zhao and the bad guys start shooting at Bond before he manages to hop into Graves' rocket skimmer. By the way, all this is taking place in full view of the departing guests. Seeing all these extras mill around in the background helps elevate all this to an even more surreal level. This leads us to possibly the most ridiculous scene in the entire James Bond series. There's so much going on here, I don't even think it's worth talking about. Well, okay, just a little. Icaraus beams its huge laser at Bond, who is rocketing across Iceland. Even though this is a big-budget movie, the whole thing looks pretty cheap and bad, and the laws of physics just get cast aside. I guess the filmmakers thought they had to update the stunt sequences for Bond to try to keep him current or something. Like they felt the need to compete with the popular special effects films at the time. It was a really bad mistake. One of the things that made the past stunts special in the series was that they were actually done for real. If they couldn't do the stunt in camera, then it was scrapped. All the planning, rehearsing, and final execution of a stunt would be one of the high points in the film, and would be one of the things that fans would watch over and over again and just be amazed to see. This whole tsunami surfing sequence is just the opposite. I'm not even going to nitpick the whole Bond is traveling at 300 miles per hour and comes to a complete stop by the little ice pick in the ground. That's small potatoes. We've seen Bond make some pretty incredible escapes in the past, but the windsurfing scene looks so out of place in the reality of the Bond series, and the escape itself feels like a real cheat. Here you have Bond hanging off the side of a glacier that's about to collapse. How's he going to escape? What's an entertaining, fun way we can surprise the audience and have them accept it and be wowed by it? He surfs the big wave. He surfs the big wave. Gimme a break. They might as well have had Bond grow wings and fly away, or be saved by some penguins, or land on a humpback whale. He'll just surf the big wave. This looks so cheap and bad. I like how Brosnan stretches after this nonsense, as if being scanned by a computer tensed up his shoulder. They couldn't even sell this kooky escape visually. Especially how they open the film with a real authentic surfing scene. This looks awful. Now all the past rear projection inserts in the stunts, they don't seem bad. Now, I'm sure a lot of work went into making this sequence by the computer animators, and Brosnan probably really worked hard standing in front of a blue screen, but this over-reliance of CGI effects shouldn't be replacing stunts in a Bond film. It dilutes what made the stunt sequences in the past 19 films so great. You know, the past 19 films, the reason for the big anniversary celebration? Oh no, we're not doing that montage again.
The manipulations that allows you now with dealing with the digital technology are endless and effortless.
Yeah, endless and effortless. Maybe that's not such a good thing. The Bond films have always mirrored current trends in films, so I guess it shouldn't have been a surprise that CGI effects would eventually make its way into 007's world. I was just shocked at what a wretched and overwhelming way in which they showed up. This was the point in the film where and I think a lot of fans, gave up any hope. For all the problems the film would have, the windsurfing scene would forever be the shorthand description of Die Another Day. It's kind of ironic that, within a film that is so self-conscious of its own history, and is constantly reminding you of past films in the series, Die Another Day doesn't even feel like it's part of the same franchise. I bet if the series started with Die Another Day, we never even would have made it to film 2. So after taking some smelling salts, we see Bond makes his way back to the Ice Palace to save Jinx. She's locked in her hotel room and Graves is about to activate Icaraus to melt the Ice Palace. Luckily, all the guests are gone, and there are only bad guys left now, so there's no problem with this idea. The invisible car... I sound like a real lunatic describing this film. The invisible car, which is supposed to be an advantage to Bond, gives away his position when a bad guy rides right into it. That moves us to an ice chase between Bond and Zhao. One of the complaints I've had with the Brosnan age is that the locations are usually interchangeable backdrops for the action. But here they do take advantage of using the glacier location for a car chase. It's okay. I mean, again, nothing really notable happens. They slide around and the two supercars fire missiles and junk at each other. Bond uses his ejector seat to flip his car back over. That despite considering if it would actually work, it's not a bad idea. The whole chase is pretty standard, but certainly is welcomed after Bond hanging 10 on the tsunami. Meanwhile, Jinx is drowning in the melting ice palace. Maybe I'm thinking about it too much, but wouldn't she be able to swim out of some hole in the room at some point? I mean, Icaraus is melting the whole joint, her room is filling up with water. That water has to be coming in from somewhere. Wouldn't the ceiling begin melting away first from the Icaraus beam? Provided she didn't get baked by the gigantic laser beam, and that ceiling wouldn't just collapse on her, which doesn't seem like it's happening. Or maybe Graves has Icaraus on a low heat setting or something. Driving around the melting ice palace, Bond tricks Zhao with his invisible car. I guess this is the big payoff for having it in the movie. I'm so glad they included the invisible car for this thrilling moment. Bond kills Zhao in what I think is supposed to be an ironic death by him getting a huge diamond dropped onto his face. Bond finally manages to save Jinx. Another close brush with death for Jinx. They really try to create some drama and tension that falls completely flat with Bond having to revive Jinx. And he's like really desperate to save her life, and we're supposed to be hoping she gets revived.
What took you so long?
What a crock. The whole Iceland portion of the film is all pretty idiotic, and it only sealed the fate of Die Another Day. The past Bond films would be set in exotic locations, and it looked like the characters were actually there. Here, other than the second unit to film the car chase, it's clear all this is taking place on sound stages or the backlot. They're using matte paintings or computers. It all looks so unconvincing and fake. The weirdest thing about it is that I think the filmmakers were actually sincere with this nonsense. I think they were as serious as a heart attack when they were filming all this. No, an actual real heart attack. Maybe we could have accepted it if they only reeled things back a bit, but the whole thing starts escalating to such a ludicrous level that you're just left shaking your head. We're getting rocket skimmers, a giant domed atrium, lousy CGI, an elaborate swan ice bed, giant laser beams. Bond's car never seems to take any damage, or maybe all the dents and scratches are just invisible. And look at this chick on roller skates. It's all so crazy and wacky. It kind of reminded me of a film in another series that gained its own notoriety.
Please, show some mercy.
Mercy?
Maybe every film should just stay away from ice and snow settings. Just based on the Iceland portion of the film, I could easily picture Die Another Day becoming one of those midnight shows, where audiences show up dressed as the zany characters from the movie. During the film, they yell back the cheesy lines of dialogue.
I hope it doesn't shrink when it gets wet.
All that's missing are some musical numbers. Someone has to write some show tunes for this thing.
A place where nobody dared to go. The love that we came to know, they call it Xanadu.
come as the diamond face guy. And the biggest kicker of all is the movie isn't even over yet.
Voilà, monsieur. Château Latour 62.
Excellent, Henri, excellent.
We have, of course, the 61.
Yes, I know, a superior vintage, but open the 62 anyway. You see, tonight, Henri, we must have a wine that is precisely 25 years old, because we are celebrating an anniversary. 1962. That was a year a chap called Bond, James Bond, first appeared in the cinemas. I'd like you to join me tonight in recalling his rather extraordinary life and times. To 007. To 25 years of adventure.
Back in 1987, Bond had his last major celebration. The year marked the 25th anniversary of the series. Fans saw the release of a new film to coincide with the milestone for the series, and there was a bunch of festive goings-on to make note of it. However, with the release of The Living Daylights and the introduction of Timothy Dalton to the role, that commemoration felt a bit more significant than this 40th one. Just the fact that fans were getting a new actor in the role, and that Daylights was to take the series in new directions, and were attempting to go back to the tone of the original works of Fleming, made things a bit more special and exciting. I mean, it's kinda nice to expose new fans to the series' history, but the actual film itself really wouldn't be anything special, even if they thought the addition of Halle Berry was worth celebrating. The 40th year, 20th film thing would just become the film's identity. There really wasn't anything new or exciting to it other than its own self-awareness that it would be the series' 20th entry. It almost felt like one of your favorite TV shows you tune in to watch and are expecting a new episode. But when it comes on, you see it's just one of those highlight reels of past episodes all edited together to try to make a new one. It makes you feel kinda cheated. With Brosnan's past 3 Bond films, there had always been a 2-year hiatus between them. But with Die Another Day, there was a 3-year gap between it and The World Is Not Enough. I always suspected that the producers intentionally waited that extra year to specifically mark this occasion, and unfortunately didn't use that extra time to really try and work on giving the Bond fans a film worth the wait, and to live up to this celebration mentality they obviously had in their heads. There was one notable allusion that wasn't included in Die Another Day, but supposedly was strongly suggested by Tamahora. An idea that would have opened up a huge can of worms within the series, and probably would have been a moment in the series that fans would continually go back to and argue about. Potentially something more monumentally stupefying than Bond's invisible car or surfing on a glacier. It started with the idea of simply having Sean Connery film a cameo in Die Another Day. Hey, that might be pretty cool, right? The problem began when he was supposed to play James Bond.
What?
There's a theory that has long been debated by fans, that the name James Bond was a code name passed down through the years, and it was used by a succession of British secret agents. Sort of like their 00 number. Say 003 would retire or get killed. The next guy that would get promoted to fill his slot would be given the number 003. This rationale was meant to justify why the character of James Bond never really ages throughout the films. Well, sometimes he ages, but... And why the character would look so different when a new actor took over the role. They're all not supposed to be the same person. So Lazenby was killed or retired, and then Roger Moore took over, got promoted to 007, and was assigned the name James Bond. Then he got killed or retired, and right on down the line until we get the Brosnan.
This never happened to the other fella.
I don't think anyone really took this idea too seriously. Every time someone would try to make it work, another person could point out something in the films to contradict it. The codename theory just seemed like a hypothetical parlor game for fans to play. The series itself never seemed to address it. They seemed like they were happy to maintain the perspective that it was a series of films that told the stories of one solitary character. That was until Tamahora came on board.
You can take your offer.
Don't
and
bother
shove-
Stacey. He's a psychopath.
Tamahora seemed to be a proponent of the codename idea. Going with this hypothesis, in his mind it allowed an opportunity to have two Bonds in one film.
And you're full of it.
So I imagine it would have gone something like Brosnan is hanging around MI6, maybe when he was playing his video game Target Practice, and Connory would show up, having long ago retired from his slot as Agent James Bond 007. Maybe he's running the Target Practice training now. He would see how the new Agent James Bond 007 is doing, offer a few words of encouragement, and leave. Just do your best, 007. Make us proud. Fans would get their Connory cameo, and Tamahora would make the bold official statement in the 20th film that we haven't been watching the same character all these years, but a bunch of different random dudes who were just given the same name.
Tell me, which lunatic asylum did they get you out of?
Stupidest idea ever. This would have contradicted all the little connections that had been made between the actors throughout the years to suggest they were in fact the same character. You know, like being married to Tracy and her getting killed. Or how about a reference from the last film?
The world is not enough.
Foolish sentiment.
Family motto.
Oh, I guess Brosnan and Lazenby happen to have the same family motto. I don't even want to get started in the argument. Like, I suppose it's mandatory that all these 5 different guys drink vodka martinis, shaken not stirred. That's somewhere in the rule book they were each given. I generally don't like to get worked up about stuff like this. Like, remember back when Star Trek VI had Spock say,
"An ancestor of mine maintained that if you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth."
And fans jumped up and said, that line is from Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes is a fictional character. That means they're saying Spock is fictional? How dare they? I kind of just shrugged that one off, but the geek really came out of me when I heard that Tamahora was going to definitively answer the James Bond as a codename proposal. That really lit me up. I had flashes of another shattered film legacy that happened a few years earlier.
I've been wondering, what are midichlorians?
I think Bond fans are savvy enough to understand that, actors age. They hire new different guys to take over the role. Further clarification isn't required. I imagined if Tamahora had his way and got Connery to play a retired James Bond and meet the current James Bond into this die another day mess, a fire would have raged in fans that would have had demands for him to be drawn and quartered, and would have started a huge drama with hardcore Bond fans and what that scene meant for the entire series and character forever. And all just for an excuse to have another quick cutesy wink-wink at the audience, no less. Fortunately, Barbara and Michael nixed this idea, and the Connery cameo never happened, and all we got was a Madonna walk-on. I never thought I would have felt so thankful for a Madonna cameo. I really think they should just keep Tamahora as far away from the James Bond films as possible. The guy is already helping destroy this movie. Isn't that enough? Now he has to start pissing on all the past films too? And the film continues with Bond and Jinx teaming up. Halle tries to act like she's helping.
300 meters.
Windage, 1.5.
Yeah, windage, sure. They have to stop Graves on his plane before he can use Icaraus to cut a path through the Korean demilitarized zone that will allow the North to invade the South. Halle tries to act like she knows what she's doing. Graves kills his father. Some more arty slow-mo action. Bond accidentally shoots out a window, and the plane starts going down. Or rather, what we're supposed to believe is a plane is going down. Never for a moment do I believe these characters are actually in peril. The rules the film sets up for Icaraus don't even make sense. We see it destroy incoming missiles, slice off a piece of glacier, utterly begin destroying the minefields and army bases, but when the plane flies near the beam, it just chips off some of its paint. They really think we're idiots. Oh boy. So Miranda and Jinx have a sword fight as the plane is falling apart. They try to persuade us that Halle can actually do this stuff with some clunky editing tricks, but we know better. One of my favorite editing tricks that they do is how Halle gets cut in the stomach during the fight, but the cut disappears at the end of the film. As improbable as it is, Jinx wins the fight and kills Miranda with sort of a "you go girl" one-liner.
Read this, bitch.
Meanwhile, in a different movie, Bond is fighting Graves, who's armed in his video game suit, and we get some more slow-mo. Graves throws some nifty 1980s-style purple electrocution shocks at Bond, and he seemingly looks like he's going to triumph. That is, until Bond pulls his parachute and throws his own nonsensical zinger at the guy.
Time to face gravity!
It doesn't even make sense. I mean, he doesn't fall, he just flies into the engine. I mean, gravity. Once Graves is killed, Icaraus shuts down, and Michael Madsen and Judi Dench can relax and stop looking at CGI explosions. With Icaraus shut down now, Bond and Jinx have to escape the falling plane painting. Jinx seems quite content just to sit there, and not even try to attempt any kind of escape. If it was me, I would use the time to at least run around the plane looking for an extra parachute or something. They get into a helicopter, it falls out of the back. A huge, unimpressive CGI explosion. I guess it's this film's way of giving one of those patented Brosnan dives out of an explosion shots. As the helicopter falls, it marks another of the lamest Bond escapes in the history of the series. Halle doesn't even look terrified or the least bit worried. If I was the director, I would have been like, cut. Okay, Pierce, very good. Bond 20, huh? Yeah, great job. Give me a minute with Halle. Halle, the helicopter is falling. You're about to die. Can you try to look a little bit more scared? It will really help the scene. I think it'll play much better. Okay? Great. Other than that, you're doing great. Yeah. Yes, we'll fix your makeup. Okay. Fire up the computers. Let's make some Bond history, folks. And action. Bond and Jinx survive, but before getting to the final scene, the film decides to crap on another iconic character from the series, and manages to make a joke out of Miss Moneypenny, with a gag about her getting it on with Bond while wearing those virtual reality glasses. Some fans got a kick out of seeing Moneypenny and Bond finally making out after those 40 years of flirting in the office. I just thought it was a cheap joke at the expense of the character. Moneypenny sure changed since they reintroduced her character in GoldenEye.
This sort of behavior could qualify as sexual harassment.
Now she's a horny tart masturbating on the office floor. I can't picture Lois Maxwell doing this scene. And so we come to the traditional closing scene with Bond and his leading lady, sharing a lame, misdirected joke for us. Jinx resigns herself that she can't keep the diamonds.
I really have to get these back.
Still the good guys, huh?
Yeah, the good guys. What a terrible read. And the 20th Bond film ends with a final closing line that I still don't understand.
Oh, so good.
Especially when you're bad.
For the first time, I was really indifferent about seeing Bond return. Do I need to say that I didn't like this movie? That came across, right? Die Another Day was pretty damn bad. I might get overly critical with Bond films, but even the ones I'm not crazy about, there are still things in each one that I do enjoy. Characters or stunts or gadgets or performances or music or lines, there's always something. With Die Another Day, it's really a test to find something that would make it worthwhile for me to go back and rewatch it. Other than the sword fight scene, I'll give it that one. There's absolutely nothing else I like about it. It pretty much fails on every level for me. I'm sure it has its share of fans, or fan. I suppose you could just turn off your brain, accept the film's lack of logic or physics or wit, ignore the presence of awful performances, appalling dialogue, an abandoned plot, embarrassing special effects, and just try to enjoy it as a colorful mess of images that are trying to goofingly entertain you. But I can't. Although I will admit I was laughing pretty hard at it when I was rewatching it. I will say if I could have gone to any James Bond movie premiere, this is the one I would have loved to have gone to.
I am pretty excited about this Bond film. It's the 40th anniversary, the 20th Bond film, and I'm hoping they'll give us something special.
Just the thought of all this pomp and circumstance surrounding the release of the 20th James Bond film, all the fanfare with invited former 007s and press coverage, and all that. And when the lights went down in the theater, this is what they saw.
I'm checking out.
Ornithologist, huh? Wow. Now there's a mouthful.
Aston Martin call it the Vanquish, we call it the Vanish.
I would have loved to have seen the look on their faces at the end of the night. I understand over the course of time the series has to evolve and change with the times, but it shouldn't have to do it by sacrificing what made it so special in the first place. Bond films have always been an over-the-top entertainment, using creativity and imagination to get us to want to believe in the world of 007. But there was no imagination or creativity present in Die Another Day. And the film pushed the limits of the reality the series had established so much that the whole thing felt like a different film series altogether, and not even an entertaining one. How does it rank alongside other films in the series? I don't usually do any kind of personal, definitive favorite to least favorite Bond film list, but looking back at the other films, I would have to go back. The popular film to compare this one to seems to be Moonraker, that notorious and plausible Bond space adventure. That's the argument I usually hear. Which is better, Die Another Day or Moonraker? I can easily say I would take Moonraker over this any day of the week. It might have been silly, but at least it had some style and classy sets, some cool stunts. I mean, just the skydiving pre-credit sequence blows everything in Die Another Day completely away. Even Roger Moore, after seeing Die Another Day, was reportedly quoted as saying, "I thought it just went too far, and that's coming from me. The first Bond in space. Invisible cars and dodgy CGI footage? Please." There are some other contenders for worse than the series, but for me, Die Another Day wins that coveted title. 2002 was truly a banner year for the Bond series in my eyes.
Martin Campbell is shooting the movie. It has a grittiness, it has a reality to it, which I think some of the latter ones lacked.
I don't think anyone anticipated 8 years earlier, when Pierce was first announced as the new 007, that he would eventually be starring in what quickly became one of the most notorious Bond films ever. In spite of that, Die Another Day was once again an enormous hit, that again hit a new record for the Brosnan age. All that promotion and interviews and all the hype that preceded the film, unfortunately, it paid off.
We want reality in our Bond.
This Bond movie has reality. I think it's the most reality-based movie we've done so far.
Now let's just spend a few seconds.
Whatever. Fans were hoping for a great entry in the series. We had optimistic expectations that we were due for a classic Bond film from Pierce this time around. All that build-up with Pierce being cast, all those hopes, all those promises, the idea that he was the chosen heir to Connory himself, it had to deliver somewhere along the lines. Die Another Day seemed like it might have been it, and based on all the positive things we were being told, I think most fans were at the very least expecting a better Bond film than what we had gotten the last few times. Come all James Bond fans, come with us and celebrate his 40th birthday, his 20th movie. He gets a new car, just buy your ticket. Halle Berry is the best Bond girl ever. You'll love it. It will be the bestest Bond film you've ever seen. The publicity machine was really working overtime. You do like 007, don't you? Come along. You don't want to miss it. Gadgets, stunts, a frightening villain, all just waiting for you. Come on, but you know what happened last time. No Denise Richards in this one. Come on, just pay your money and get your ticket. Hurry. Gotcha. We were tricked. I don't blame this unmemorable run in the series solely on Brosnan. I always thought he was genuinely thrilled to be playing 007, and was eager to add some new quality films to the series' legacy. GoldenEye seemed like an encouraging start, even though I didn't think he was particularly special in it, but it looked like a promising beginning to where the series was going to go. As things went on, Brosnan seemed to get better and more secure in the role, but the films he was handed just got worse and worse, until he was relegated to just being a one-dimensional action figure. By the end, he wasn't given anything to do, and just looked bored and going through the motions of a James Bond performance. Any expectations he might have had about playing the James Bond character seemed to disappear, and it didn't seem like it was very important to the producers or writers. Even with their declarations of a deeper examination planned for the character, that each of Brosnan's films had the potential to do, they all ended up not amounting to a thing. There wasn't any weight behind any of them in the stories. They were all just window dressing, and they were quickly dropped when some explosions started. What the Brosnan age promised and what actually happened was drastically different. Brosnan ended up just being the image of James Bond, who was plugged into loud, flashy movies. After Sean Connery established the character, it was always said each actor brought something new to the role of James Bond. George Lazenby, a physicality. Roger Moore, a tongue-in-cheek humor. Timothy Dalton, an intensity. Pierce Brosnan, I don't know. I'm not sure I know who Brosnan's Bond was. Ironically, during the course of his Bond films, I thought he did much better and more interesting roles outside the series. Even some of his post-Bond movies I've liked more than his Bond work. In 2010, with some perspective on his Bond run, Pierce critiqued his own performance as Bond, feeling he never really nailed the role, and also confessing his true thoughts about Tomorrow Never Dies. When I did Tomorrow Never Dies, I knew the movie wasn't up to speed. It wasn't as good as GoldenEye. He didn't mention anything about Die Another Day, though.
I'm often asked, who is the best James Bond? And the answer really is quite simple. Whoever you saw first.
I don't think it's quite that simple, but Brosnan was, and still is, an extremely popular 007, and is continually ranked as one of the best. Everyone has their own thoughts, and I can't argue with their opinion, but for me, I think of him as one of the weakest Bonds in the series. When he left the role after his 4th film, I considered him the first Bond actor never having done a classic Bond movie. I'm still completely puzzled when I'll occasionally see someone's greatest Bond girls list, and Jinx is somehow near the top of it. I suspect that person either never actually watched Die Another Day, or there's another version of it that's drastically different and is actually good, and I've just never seen it. As bad as Die Another Day might have been, it did make tons of money, and there didn't seem like any reason the filmmakers would want to tinker with the formula. So what if artistically the series was in the toilet? They were making boatloads of money. But all the money it generated didn't silence the universal grumbling and eye-rolling from dissatisfied fans.
Where are those happy days? They seem so hard to find. I try to reach for you, but you have closed your mind. Whatever happened to our love? I wish I understood. It used to be so nice, it used to be so good. So when you're near me, darling, can't you hear me? SOS. The love you gave me, nothing else can save me. SOS. When you're gone, how can I even try to go on? When you're gone, though I try, how can I carry on?
You just killed James Bond.
The series got an updating alright, but not a very inspiring one. If this was the direction the films were going in, it looked pretty discouraging. Even thoughts of putting it to rest didn't seem like such a bad idea. Crap, if this was the 40th anniversary, I shuddered to think what they would do for the 50th. Gradually, the idea of Jinx getting her own spin-off film seemed to disappear. But it did seem like Brosnan would be returning as 007. He would get the inevitable question,
what about playing him for the 5th time? Is that on the cards?
Well, they've invited me back, and I've said yes, so it looks like there'll be a 5th.
And might there be a 6th after that?
I don't know, Michael. I have no idea. I cannot tell the future that far. But I've had the time of my life playing him. You know,
Good.
it's been a great time.
Yeah.
It seemed like we would be seeing him again. Die Another Day marked a stage the series always seems to reach, over and over again. Having gotten to the point where the films get so outlandish and out of control, there isn't any other choice but to reel things in a bit, and get back to some kind of reality in the next film. That's what I would have thought Brosnan's 5th outing as 007 would have been. No ice palaces or invisible cars, but something more along the lines of GoldenEye. Get back to doing some real actual stunts. Maybe give us a good Bond girl. Some cool characters. Relax on the sci-fi gadgets. It would probably still have lots of machine guns, though. Brosnan was pushing 50, but doing one last Bond film didn't seem too unreasonable. I don't think he had reached the really pushing it elderly 57-year-old Bond that Roger Moore was in his last film yet. Pierce could stick around for a little longer. A 5th film would give Brosnan one last chance to make a great Bond film, and retire from the role on a better note than the icy debacle we just witnessed. That's how everything looked like it would go. We would just have to wait a few years for Brosnan to return and see his 5th Bond film.
Then maybe it's time you let me get on with my job.
everyone's mind, of course, is who's going to be the next James Bond. A little bunny told me in a reputable show business magazine this week, Pierce Brosnan revealed that he'd been fired after 4 Bond films. Fired! Yes! And his replacement has not been named. Pierce isn't sure why he was fired. He's not a bad actor. He's not a bad actor, come on. He's a good guy. But let's face it, I could kick his ass. Anyone could kick his ass! He looks like he moisturizes. Come on!
Sit down.
Sit down.
I guess you have access to some very sensitive material, which you're going to be forced to give up. You won't hesitate.
Looks like your friends have failed.